I still remember that night like a crack in the sky. The porch light had burned all summer, but that night it was too bright, too steady, as if it knew something I did not. Funny how a man past 60 still feels warnings in his bones. My knees ache when rain is near and my chest tightens when trouble's coming. Sandra was late. Not late like traffic lights and a slow train late, but late like someone who forgot time was passing. The house was quiet, even rocket. Our corgi was sleeping by the back door. I turned the radio on an old wooden Zenith I've fixed twice over, and the warm static filled the kitchen. I like static. It tells you the machine is alive even when no one's talking. She came in near midnight smelling of something too sweet to be perfume. I didn't ask right away. My father once told me a man who rushes to anger wastes his best weapon, patience. So I kissed her on the cheek, said nothing, and went back to my chair. Her eyes looked guilty or maybe just tired. Hard to tell after 30 years together, but my gut said guilty. The next morning I saw the first sign. A gas receipt on the counter, wrong town. I know where she works. This was 20 miles off route. She said she'd stopped for coffee with a friend from high school. I nodded, said, "Sounds nice," but inside something shifted. Little things began to speak loudly after that. The way she guarded her phone like it was a lottery ticket. The extra time in the shower. The smile she wore coming home, the kind of smile you give someone else before you walk through your own door. I started writing it down not because I planned to use it, but because writing clears the fog. Each note went into a small leather journal, the one my daughter gave me for Christmas. Dates, times, little smells, new excuses. A record of my own unraveling. It was a Sunday evening when I saw the real crack in the dam. She left her laptop open in the kitchen, screen dim but not locked. A message popped up, just a first name and a line that read, "Last night was perfect. Same place next week." My hands didn't shake. Not the way I thought they might. I just closed the lid, fed the dog, and sat on the porch till the sun went down. That's when the porch light flickered. Once, twice, then burned steady again. I swear it was like the house itself was saying, "You saw it, old man. You can't unsee it now." I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I brewed coffee and stayed up late staring at the dark yard and thinking about the long road behind us, mortgages paid, birthdays missed for overtime shifts, the good years and the rough ones. A man can forgive a lot, but not a lie that grows roots. When she finally came to bed, she whispered, "You still awake?" "Yeah," I said, voice calm. "You okay?" I stared at the ceiling fan, turning slow and steady. "I will be," I said. And I meant it. Whatever was about to happen, I'd face it with both eyes open. I woke before sunrise, the house still and gray. There's something about that hour when the world hasn't yet decided what kind of day it will be. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sat at the kitchen table with my leather journal. The porch light was still on. I wrote that down, too. You see, a man my age learns that proof matters. Feelings come and go, but facts will stand when your hands are too tired to hold them. I wasn't going to accuse her with nothing but a hunch. That would make me the fool in my own story. So I began keeping a ledger. Every odd thing went in there. Receipts from gas stations far from her route. Timestamps on bank withdrawals I knew we hadn't discussed. Twice I followed her car at a distance, staying 3 cars back like some kind of amateur detective. Both times she turned left where she should have turned right. I felt sick doing it. My father's voice echoed in my head. "If you have to spy on the woman you love, son, you've already lost." But this wasn't about trust anymore. It was about clarity. 3 weeks into my quiet watch, the final nail came by accident. I had just come back from the hardware store when a neighbor waved me over. He was an older fellow, widowed, spends most of his time on the porch like a gargoyle watching the street. "You weren't home Friday night, were you?" he asked. "No," I said carefully. "Well," he said, scratching his jaw, "I saw a car in your driveway late. Not yours." And a man got out. Tall fella, baseball cap. Went in the back door like he'd been there before. I thanked him, though my chest felt like someone had put a vice on it. When I walked back inside, Rocket barked once, low and uneasy. Dogs know things. That night I waited. I told Sandra I had a late poker game. In truth, I parked down the street where the oak trees throw deep shadows. I watched my own house from the dark. Hours passed. The world went quiet except for the cicadas. Then just past 10 headlights appeared, the same car my neighbor described. He didn't even hesitate, just walked up and knocked softly on the back door. Sandra let him in. No hesitation there either. I stayed in the car another 30 minutes, gripping the wheel so hard my hands ached. When I finally drove away, it felt like I'd swallowed a stone. The next morning, Sandra was cheerful, humming while she made coffee. I wrote that down too. The strange thing was, once I had the truth, I felt calmer, like the storm had broken and left clear air behind. I spent the day putting things in order. Made copies of the receipts, printed screenshots of the bank transactions, wrote down the license plate of the man's car. Not because I planned to drag them to court, no, this was for me. For my peace of mind. By evening, I'd decided on one last thing. If she was going to keep lying, I'd give her a chance to do it to my face. After dinner, I set the journal on the table between us. "Sandra?" I said, voice steady as I could make it. "I think we need to talk." She froze, spatula still in her hand. "About what?" "About Friday nights. And gas receipts from towns we don't live in. And a man with a baseball cap who seems to know our back door better than I do." Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "You've been spying on me," she hissed. "I've been watching," I corrected softly, because I needed to know whether the woman I share this house with still shares her life with me. For a long minute, all I heard was the tick of the kitchen clock. Then she set the spatula down and said, "It's not what you think." Those 5 words. I almost laughed. They are the anthem of guilty people everywhere. I didn't yell, didn't curse, just slid the journal toward her. "This is what I know. If there's a story you'd rather tell, now's your chance." She didn't open the book. She just sat down slowly like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. There it was, confirmation, quiet and heavy. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked the porch until my legs hurt. I thought about every year of our marriage, every photo on the wall, every promise we'd ever made. My heart didn't break loud like glass. It cracked soft like ice on a winter pond. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I was going to end it. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with a kind of dignity a man can live with. If she wanted this stranger so badly, she could have him. But she wouldn't have me, and she wouldn't have the quiet respect we'd built for 30 years. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about saving myself. When you get past 60, you learn that anger is loud, but justice is quiet. The next week, I treated evidence like it was a shy creature I had to coax out of the woods. No stomping, no shouting, just patience and a steady hand. I made copies of everything and stored them in a small fireproof box in the garage, the one that used to hold old tax returns. Dates, times, license plates, even a photo or two when I dared to get close enough with my phone. I wasn't collecting this for a fight. I was collecting it so I wouldn't doubt myself later. Doubt is a cruel companion when you are alone at night. Sandra noticed my new calm and mistook it for forgiveness. She smiled more, asked if I wanted to watch a movie, even made my favorite pie one evening. It was almost cruel the way she was trying to keep the illusion standing while the truth was already sitting across the table eating with us. One night I caught my reflection in the kitchen window and almost didn't recognize myself. My back was straighter, my eyes clear. Strange thing betrayal can do, that strip you down to the bone and show you what's left. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I was sitting in the library downtown pretending to read the paper when I overheard 2 lawyers talking softly in the next booth. They weren't talking about my case. There wasn't a case yet, but they were talking about a man who'd found out too late, about bank accounts drained, about alimony he couldn't fight. That night, I called an old friend from church, a retired attorney named Bill. I didn't tell him everything right away, just enough to make him sigh into the phone. "You'll want to get ahead of this, son," he said. Waiting never made a divorce cheaper. The next morning, we met at his office over stale coffee. He laid it out, plain document, everything, keep your cool, and for heaven's sake, don't leave the house voluntarily. Possession is 9/10, he said, tapping the desk, and make sure you're the one who files first. It sets the tone. I drove home with my mind humming like a power line. I wasn't just a man betrayed now, I was a man with a plan. Over the next few days, I started moving pieces quietly. I opened a separate checking account and redirected my paycheck. I inventoried the tools in my workshop, took pictures of heirlooms that had been in my family longer than this marriage. Not because I was afraid she'd take them, but because the court might. At night, I pretended to fall asleep early. After she turned off the lights, I'd sit in the dark listening to her phone buzz on the nightstand. Sometimes she'd slip out of bed and pad to the kitchen to whisper into the receiver. I wrote those times down too. It wasn't bitterness driving me, now it was clarity. I had spent too many years working overtime shifts, paying off a mortgage building, something I thought would last. If it was all going to burn down, I was going to make sure I walked out with my dignity and at least half of what I'd built. Then came the night that locked it all in place. I had set up an old motion camera in the garage, just a cheap thing meant to catch raccoons. Instead, it caught them. Sandra and the man in the baseball cap. I didn't watch the footage right away. Just sat there with the SD card in my palm, the weight of it heavier than a bullet. When I finally plugged it in and watched, there was no more room for questions. It wasn't passionate or romantic, just two people too careless to hide. That hurt more somehow. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I copied the footage onto a flash drive and labeled it simply Truth. The next morning, I was calm enough to make her breakfast. She kissed my cheek and said, "You seem lighter these days." "Maybe I am," I said. I wasn't lying. I felt lighter because I had handed the burden to the future. Soon I would file the papers, meet her at the kitchen table one last time, and slide the truth across to her like a check she'd have to cash. But not today. Today I sat on the porch with Rocket at my feet, sipped coffee, and let the sun climb over the oak trees. The world hadn't ended yet, and I wanted to watch it a little longer before I turned the page. By the end of the week, I had everything ready: financial documents in neat folders, witness statements from my neighbor, even a record of the nights I slept alone in my own house. Bill said we were in a strong position. "You're sure about this?" he asked as we reviewed the packet one last time. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had built fences, held newborns, signed paychecks. They didn't shake. "I'm sure," I said. When I walked out of his office into the bright afternoon, I felt the strangest thing: relief. Like stepping out of a hot, stuffy room into clean air. That night, I turned off the porch light before going to bed. For weeks, it had been my silent sentinel, my companion in doubt. Now, I didn't need its warning. I knew where I was going, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly. The first warm wind of spring came that Friday night, carrying the smell of cut grass and something else, something like change. I sat on the porch with Rocket curled at my feet, listening to the wind chimes from Mrs. Parker's house next door. She was widowed 15 years back, but still painted her porch swing every summer. She'd been watching me these past few weeks, her sharp eyes catching what most people missed. That evening, she walked over with a plate of cornbread and sat down without asking. "You've got that look," she said, setting the plate between us. "What look?" "The look of a man about to light a match and walk away from the fire." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Maybe I already struck the match. She didn't press, just patted my hand. "Be careful what you burn, son. Some things you can't rebuild even if you want to." Her words stayed with me long after she left. But I knew what I had to do. I had lived too long being careful. It was time to be clear. Saturday morning, I called Bill and told him I was ready. He arrived with a folder of papers and a face that said he'd been through this 100 times, but still wished he didn't have to. "She deserves to know before the sheriff hands her these," he said, tapping the envelope. "I know," I said. That afternoon, I asked Sandra to sit down. Rocket stayed at my feet, ears twitching like he knew something big was coming. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I simply placed the folder on the table and slid the flash drive across. "This is the truth," I said quietly. She didn't reach for it. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said, "of where you've been, of who you've let into this house, and of why we won't be married much longer." Her face crumpled, but I held steady. "If you want to deny it, you can. But the judge won't." For a long moment, she just stared at the folder. Then she stood and walked to the sink, bracing herself against the counter. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "No," I said, my voice calm. "It wasn't." That night I slept in the guest room. I could hear her crying through the wall, but I didn't get up. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. The next day, she tried a new approach. She made breakfast, sat across from me, and said, "We can fix this. I'll cut him off. We can go to counseling." I sipped my coffee slowly. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said. "You're sorry you got caught. That's not the same thing." She flinched like I'd struck her, but I didn't look away. "I spent 30 years building a life with you. I'm not going to spend the next 30 pretending it still exists." That afternoon, Mrs. Parker caught me by the mailbox. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "About as well as you'd expect," I said. She nodded. "Then hold steady, son. The storm gets loud right before it blows out." She was right. That week was the loudest of my life. Sandra swung between pleading and fury, accusing me of betrayal for talking to a lawyer, then begging me to give her another chance. Each time I answered the same way, calm, steady, polite. The man in the baseball cap even showed up one evening. I found him standing in my driveway, shifting from foot to foot like a teenager caught sneaking out. "You don't have to destroy her," he said. I stepped closer until we were eye to eye. "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm letting it collapse under its own weight." He swallowed hard and backed away. The filing went through on Thursday. Bill called to confirm his voice, even. "You're officially the petitioner now," he said. "Feels strange," I admitted. "It always does," he said. "But you did it right, clean documented, no fireworks." That night I sat on the porch with the wind chimes singing soft. For the first time in weeks, the porch light felt less like a warning and more like a lighthouse guiding me home. By Sunday, Sandra moved into the guest room without me asking. The house felt different, emptier, but also calmer. I spent the afternoon in the garage, cleaning tools, putting my hands to work so my mind could settle. Mrs. Parker stopped by again, her plate this time filled with ginger cookies. "The air feels clearer," she said, stepping into the garage. "It is," I said, "like after a storm." She smiled. "Then keep it clear, son. Don't let bitterness settle where the dust used to be." I promised her I wouldn't. That night, I opened my leather journal and wrote one final line on the last page: "The truth is in the open now. Whatever comes next, I can face it." Then I closed the book and set it on the shelf. I wouldn't need it anymore. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper, like history and judgment mixed together. Bill met me at the front steps, his tie crooked like always. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. Inside, the halls were quiet. Divorce court isn't like the movies. No shouting, no dramatic juries gasping in unison, just people sitting on benches clutching envelopes that hold their lives. I took a seat leather folder on my lap and waited for my name to be called. Sandra came in 5 minutes later. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the last few weeks had pressed her down. She didn't look at me. Maybe she couldn't. When our case was called, we walked to the front like strangers. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and brisk. She flipped through our file as if she'd read 100 like it that morning already. Bill did most of the talking. He laid out the ledger of evidence, the receipts, the camera footage, the witness statement from my neighbor. Sandra's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. "This goes to character," she said. Sandra stared at the table the whole time. Not once did she deny it. When it was her turn, her lawyer spoke about forgiveness, about reconciliation. He painted her as a woman who had made a mistake but deserved the chance to make things right. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. When the judge looked at me, I spoke only once. "Your Honor." I said, my voice steady. "I don't hate her. But I can't share a roof with someone who lied to me in my own home. I'm here to make sure this ends cleanly." The judge studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "That's a reasonable request." The ruling came quicker than I expected. Temporary orders: I would keep the house during proceedings. Finances would be split, but Sandra would not have access to my pension until final judgment. There was mention of spousal support, but even that would be minimal because of her misconduct. Bill smiled slightly as we left. "You just won the first battle," he said. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "That's because you're not petty," he said. "But trust me, this is as good as it gets." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork. I signed, initialed, notarized until my hand cramped. Sandra tried to talk to me once in the driveway. She cried and said she had nowhere to go. "You've got family," I said gently. "They'll help you." "And you won't?" she asked, voice cracking. I shook my head. "Not like before. Not anymore." Mrs. Parker became my quiet ally through it all. She'd bring me pie or just sit with me on the porch. One night she said, "You know you're not just ending a marriage. You're rewriting the whole story of who you were with her." I know I said, "But I'd rather write an honest ending than live in a false middle." She nodded approvingly. "Then make it a good ending." Bill and I prepared for the final hearing. We gathered every last piece of documentation, even photos of the house showing the repairs I had done over the years. "This isn't spite," Bill said. "This is making sure the judge knows what you built." The night before court, I walked through each room like it was a museum exhibit. My hands brushed over the door frame where we'd marked our daughter's height years ago, the fireplace mantel where every Christmas photo had been taken. "This is my house," I whispered, "not to anyone in particular. I won't let it slip away." On the day of the final hearing, Sandra showed up looking different. Her lawyer had probably told her to soften her image, no jewelry, simple dress hair tied back. She looked almost like the woman I'd married decades ago. But when the evidence was presented, even she didn't argue. The judge signed the decree. I kept the house. Minimal alimony for 1 year only. Clean division of assets otherwise. Sandra looked at me then for the first time in weeks. There was no anger in her eyes, just something hollow. As we left the courtroom, she whispered, "You really meant to leave me with nothing." I stopped and looked at her. "No," I said softly. "You left yourself with nothing. I just stopped pretending it was otherwise." When I got home that evening, I turned on the porch light and let it burn until dawn. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was a signal to myself. This house, this life would be quiet again. Over the next month, I fixed things around the house, repaired a loose shutter, painted the back steps. Each task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Neighbors waved and asked how I was doing. I told them the truth better every day. But revenge, if you can call it that, came quietly. Word spread around town. People knew why the marriage had ended. The man in the baseball cap quit showing up, and soon his car was gone for good. Sandra moved out of state. I heard she was renting a small apartment near her sister's house. I didn't feel joy at that news, just a kind of finality like the last nail tapped into a fence post. One evening, Bill came by with a bottle of bourbon. "You're officially a free man," he said, handing me the decree in a crisp folder. I poured 2 glasses, and we sat on the porch until the stars came out. "Funny thing," I said, "I thought this would feel like victory. But it just feels quiet." "That's what victory really is at our age," Bill said. "Not noise, peace." And he was right. The first morning after the decree, the house felt different. Quieter, yes, but not hollow, like it was breathing again. I woke before dawn, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat on the porch watching the mist rise from the grass. Rocket stretched, yawned, and lay beside me, his head on my shoe like he'd been waiting for this moment, too. I took my first deep breath in months and felt it land in my chest without that tightness I'd grown used to. Peace, I realized, is not loud. It just sits with you until you notice it. I spent that week putting the house in order, not because it was messy, but because I needed to reclaim every corner. I cleared out the guest room first. Fresh sheets, new curtains, opened the windows to let the stale air drift out. Then the kitchen drawers, sorting through decades of gadgets and tossing what we no longer needed. Each item I packed for donation felt like peeling away a layer of old skin. The journals stayed. I stacked them neatly in the study, a record of the storm I'd walked through. One day, maybe my daughter would read them and know that her father didn't crumble, he stood up. People started dropping by again. At first, it was just Mrs. Parker who brought me a loaf of bread and said, "The house smells lighter." Then it was the couple from across the street who invited me over for barbecue. It had been years since I'd sat in their backyard laughing over ribs and lemonade. "Feels good to have you back," the neighbor said. "Feels good to be back," I admitted. Evenings became my favorite time again. I'd sit on the porch with a book or sometimes just watch the street lamps flicker on one by one. The porch light burned, but now it felt like a companion, not a sentinel. One night I heard Mrs. Parker's wind chimes singing and saw her sitting on her swing. I walked over with 2 mugs of tea. "You look 10 years younger," she said with a sly smile. "Guess I put down some weight," I said. You put down more than weight, she replied. You put down fear. That's the heaviest thing of all. She was right. My daughter came home for a visit not long after. She had heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, but I wanted her to hear it straight. We sat at the kitchen table, same spot where I'd confronted her mother. I need you to know this wasn't quick, I said. I tried to handle it with respect. She nodded, eyes misty. I know, Dad, and I'm proud of you for not losing yourself. We spent the evening eating pie and flipping through old photo albums, laughing at hairstyles we should have burned evidence of long ago. It was around then that I noticed something else. Silence no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like space. Space to read the morning paper without glancing at the clock, space to whistle while I worked in the garage, space to just be. Bill stopped by one Saturday to help me fix the back fence. So what's next? He asked, hammering a nail. Living, I said simply. That's a good plan, he said, smiling. But recovery isn't just sunshine. There were nights when memory crept in like an old ache, when I'd catch myself staring at the empty chair across the table. On those nights, I'd turn on the radio and let the static fill the kitchen, reminding me I wasn't alone. Once I even dreamed of Sandra, just her voice calling me from another room. I woke with a start, heart thudding, but then I heard Rocket snoring softly and the house was calm again. By late summer, I had repainted the porch and planted a new row of marigolds along the walk. Neighbors said the place looked cheerful. I realized they were right. The house wasn't a place of secrets anymore. It was just home. One Sunday after church, Mrs. Parker stopped me as I walked up the drive. I saw you smiling in there, she said. Guess I had a reason, I said. You're ready, she said simply. For what? To open the next chapter. That night, I sat with my journal again, but this time I didn't write about hurt or betrayal. I wrote about what I'd learned, that forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what broke you, and that sometimes survival is its own kind of victory. Then I closed the journal and put it back on the shelf. The next morning, I called my daughter and asked if she'd like to come over for Sunday supper next week. Bring whoever you're seeing these days, I added. You sure, she asked? Yes, I said. It's time this house heard more laughter. When I hung up, the wind stirred Mrs. Parker's chimes again. For the first time, I let myself smile without guilt. The worst was over, and the world hadn't ended, it had just changed shape. The late summer evenings came slow, stretching out like honey across the sky. One Tuesday, just as the cicadas started their steady hum, there was a knock on my front door. Rocket barked once, a low, lazy sound, as if even he was curious who'd come calling at this hour. When I opened the door, I saw a woman standing there, mid-40s, neat denim jacket hair tied back with a scarf. She smiled politely. Sorry to bother you, she said. I'm Claire. Just moved in 2 houses down. Mrs. Parker said you might know the best place to get screens repaired. My porch door's a mess. I pointed her to an old handyman downtown who'd been patching screens since before I was born. But something in her easy manner, the way she thanked me, lingered after she left. I hadn't thought about meeting new neighbors in years. The next few days, I kept noticing her watering a row of tomato plants in her yard, waving when she drove by. Once she stopped while I was painting the porch railing. You're making that house look sharp, she said. Trying to keep up with Mrs. Parker, I joked. Claire laughed. Good luck. That woman's a force of nature. Her laugh stayed with me the rest of the day. That weekend, my daughter came over for Sunday supper like we'd planned. She brought a friend, just a friend, she assured me, but the house rang with laughter for the first time in a long while. We grilled out back, Rocket running circles around us. As we sat under the string lights I'd hung years ago, my daughter said, You seem lighter, Dad. I am, I admitted. Feels like I set down a load I'd been carrying too long. She nodded and smiled softly. Mom called me last week. I stiffened, but she raised a hand. Relax. She just wanted to tell me she's moving again. Farther away this time. I let out a long breath. Maybe that's for the best. It is, she said simply. A few nights later, I saw Claire struggling with a bag of potting soil in her driveway. I walked over, offered a hand, and carried it to her porch. You didn't have to do that, she said. I didn't mind, I replied. Besides, this neighborhood's better when people look out for each other. She smiled. Then you're officially my first neighborly rescue. After that, our conversations became a quiet rhythm. She'd wave when she saw me on the porch. I'd stop by to return her tools or share extra vegetables from my little garden. Mrs. Parker, of course, noticed. One afternoon, she leaned on her fence and said that Claire seems nice. She is, I said cautiously. Don't look so spooked. Mrs. Parker chuckled. I'm not matchmaking. Just saying you smile more these days. I pretended not to hear her, but she wasn't wrong. One Saturday, Claire invited me over for coffee. Her house still smelled like fresh paint. We sat at her kitchen table talking about books, music, the strange charm of small-town life. At one point, she asked, Were you always here with your wife? The question was gentle, not prying. I nodded slowly. 30 years. She didn't look shocked or pitying, just thoughtful. Must be strange learning to live alone after that. It was, I said. But I'm starting to think it's not the worst thing in the world. She smiled at that, and for a moment the kitchen felt warm in a way I hadn't felt in months. That night, as I sat on my porch, I opened my journal again. I didn't write about betrayal this time. I wrote about the knock at dusk, the neighbor's smile, the way the house no longer felt like a tomb, but like a place with doors and windows open to the world. Yet just when I thought life was settling into its gentle new rhythm, a letter arrived. Postmarked from a town several states away, addressed in Sandra's handwriting. I stood there on the porch envelope in hand-heart, strangely calm. Whatever was inside, I knew it couldn't undo what I'd built back here. Still, I slid my thumb under the flap. Inside was a single page handwritten. I wanted to tell you that I'm leaving the country, it read. I know I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you find peace if you haven't already. No return address, no plea for reconciliation, just a farewell. I sat there a long time, letter on my knee wind chimes, singing faintly next door. Then I folded it, set it in the back of the journal, and closed the book. When I went inside, Rocket trailed behind me, tail wagging. I looked around the kitchen at the warm light, the empty sink, the life I'd rebuilt. Peace wasn't something I was waiting for anymore. It was already here. Autumn came in slow this year, painting the neighborhood in deep golds and rust reds. Every morning, I'd rake leaves off the front walk, breathing in that sharp smell of cold air and wood smoke. The house felt fuller somehow, even though I still lived alone. Claire stopped by one Saturday with a basket of muffins. Too many for me, she said, setting them on my counter. Thought you might help me get rid of them. Twist my arm, I said, smiling as I brewed us both coffee. We sat at the kitchen table where so many hard conversations had once happened, but now there was only easy talk. She told me about her work, about how she'd moved here to start over after her own divorce years ago. You know, she said thoughtfully, starting over feels less scary when you see someone else doing it too. I nodded. It's strange, I admitted. This house used to feel like the end of my story. Now it feels like chapter 1. After she left, I walked through the house again, noticing the little changes I'd made since everything ended, the fresh paint, the rearranged bookshelves, the porch swing I'd finally repaired. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was mine. That night, I took down the last of Sandra's photos. Not out of anger, just because it was time. I boxed them, carefully labeled them, and set them in the attic. When I came back downstairs, the walls looked bare but clean, like they were waiting for new memories. The next Sunday, my daughter came over again, this time with more news. Dad, she said hesitantly, Mom called me again. She sounded different, like she's really leaving things behind. I poured us both tea and let her talk. Do you think I should visit her before she leaves the country, she asked. That's your choice, I said carefully. If you think it would help you, then go. Just don't do it out of guilt. You owe her honesty, not penance. She nodded slowly. That's what I needed to hear. Later that week, I heard a knock at the door just after sundown. It was Claire again, holding 2 mugs of cider. Figured you might want company for the first cold night of the year, she said. We sat on the porch with blankets over our knees, sipping cider, while the wind rattled the marigolds. Do you ever think about going back? She asked quietly. No, I said without hesitation. Not because I hate her, but because I'm not that man anymore. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. The first frost came in late October, covering the yard in white lace. I turned on the porch light early that night, not as a warning, not even as a habit, just because I wanted it shining. As I stood there, I realized something I no longer thought about: revenge. That word had been sharp and hot for so long, but now it felt distant, almost unnecessary. What I'd wanted wasn't to punish her. It was to reclaim myself. And I had. I wrote one last entry in my journal that night she's gone. I stayed, and that's the victory. Then I closed the book and put it on the shelf. Not as evidence anymore, just as part of the story that got me here. The next weekend, Claire invited me and my daughter over for dinner. It wasn't fancy, just soup and bread, but the table was warm, the conversation easy. At one point, my daughter caught my eye across the table and smiled a quiet approval that said more than words. When we walked home later, she squeezed my hand. "I like her," she said softly. "So do I," I replied. That night, I left the porch light on when I went to bed just because it felt right. Winter arrived with its own kind of hush. Snow fell heavy that first week of December, blanketing the street until everything looked clean and new. I shoveled the walk early one morning, breath steaming, when Claire came trudging up in boots and a wool hat. "Your porch light looks like a lantern in all this snow," she said, pulling her scarf down and smiling. "Good," I said. "Let it burn." Over the next few weeks, we spent more time together. It started with small things, helping her hang curtains, inviting her over for soup when the roads iced up. One night she brought over an old record player, said her ex had left it behind and she thought I might like it. We sat in the living room while a jazz record spun softly, and for the first time in a long time I danced. Just a slow, awkward shuffle in the middle of the rug, but it felt right. "You're a good man," Claire said. When the song ended, her voice quiet. "Trying to be," I replied. Then came the letter that nearly tipped me back into the storm. It arrived a week before Christmas, this one, from a lawyer representing Sandra. It wasn't hostile, just an official notice that she wanted to transfer her share of some old joint savings account entirely to me before she left the country for good. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the paper. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it stirred up every old ache. That night, Claire came by to drop off some cookies. She saw the envelope on the counter and asked gently, "Bad news?" "No," I said after a pause, "just old news." She nodded. But later, as we sat drinking cocoa, she said, "You don't have to go through every reminder alone, you know. People who care about you can help carry some of that." Her words sat with me long after she left. Christmas came quiet that year, just me, my daughter, and Rocket by the tree. But there was laughter, there were carols on the radio, and there was no weight in the air. After dinner, I went to the porch and looked out over the snowy yard. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to hold together something that had already cracked. This year, I didn't feel cracked. New Year's Eve brought a different kind of turning point. Claire invited me to her place with a few neighbors. We toasted with cider at midnight, and when the room fell quiet, she slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her at the warmth in her eyes. "I think I am," I said, for the first time in a long while. The next week, I finally went to the bank and signed the papers Sandra had sent. It wasn't an act of anger or of forgiveness, just an end to that chapter. When I came home, Claire was on my porch, cheeks red from the cold, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Well," she asked. "It's done," I said. She smiled, handed me the coffee, and said, "Then maybe it's time you let yourself be happy." That night, we sat on the porch under the stars. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, not just about Sandra, but about my own fears. How I'd worried I'd never trust anyone again. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said softly, "You don't have to trust me all at once, but you can let me earn it piece by piece." Her words landed in my chest like a seed taking root. For the first time, I left the porch light on, not just for myself, but for someone else who might be coming by. Spring came early that year. The snow melted into little rivers along the curb, and the marigolds I'd planted months ago poked green shoots back through the thawed earth. It felt like the house itself was breathing with me, ready for something new. One Saturday morning, Claire stopped by with a thermos of coffee. "Come on," she said, grinning. "You're coming with me to the farmer's market." I laughed, but went anyway. We walked through rows of fresh bread jars of honey and bright flowers. I bought a bouquet, not for a grave, not for a memory, but for my kitchen table. "You look different today," Claire said as we loaded the car. "Feels different," I admitted. Like the air's cleared. Later that week, my daughter came over for dinner. I told her about the market, about Claire, about how I felt like life had stopped being something to endure and started being something to enjoy again. "You're allowed to be happy, Dad," she said, smiling. "Mom's choices don't get to decide the rest of your life." I nodded. I think I finally believe that. One evening, just as the sun was setting, Claire came by carrying 2 cups of tea. "Want to sit on the porch with me?" she asked. We sat there watching the sky turn pink and gold. The wind chimes next door were singing softly, and for a long time neither of us said anything. "You know," Claire said at last, "you've rebuilt something pretty special here." I looked at the freshly painted porch, the glowing windows, the tidy yard. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I guess I have." Before she left that night, I walked her to the gate. Rocket followed, tail wagging. She turned to me and said, "Whatever happens next, you've done the hard part. You didn't let bitterness win." I stood there a moment after she left, letting the words sink in. That weekend, I took out my journal one last time. I wrote, "I thought this story was about losing a wife. Turns out it was about finding myself. The betrayal was the fire, but the man I am now is what came out of the ashes. This house, this life, it's mine now, and I will keep the porch light on not for the past, but for whatever good may find its way to my door." I closed the book and set it on the shelf. Not as evidence, not as a wound, just as a chapter that had been lived and finished. The last scene is quiet me on the porch, coffee in hand, the porch light shining softly as dusk settles. My daughter's car pulls up. Claire comes walking down the street, scarf fluttering. Rocket barks once, then wags his tail. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm waiting for something bad to happen. I just feel ready. Here's the next story. I still remember the way that night smelled. It was one of those warm, lazy evenings, the kind where you roll down your windows driving home thinking life is good and steady. And back then, I believed my life was just that steady, safe, maybe even heading toward something permanent. Marriage, kids, the whole deal. See, Anna and I had been together 5 years. 5 years is long enough to feel like you know a person better than you know yourself. I knew the kind of ring she wanted, a round cut, nothing too flashy, and I knew the exact way she hated those big public proposals folks put on for TikTok. I thought I was just biding my time until I was ready to get down on one knee. But life has a funny way of reminding you that you never really have all the pieces, not even when you think you do. It started with a message. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was mindlessly scrolling Instagram, half watching some late-night show in the background. Then a little notification popped up, message request. Some guy I didn't follow. Now I almost ignored it. At my age, you learn most message requests aren't worth your time. But there was something about it, short, direct. "Hey man, I need to tell you something about Anna." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. It's strange how your gut can sense the truth before your brain catches up. I messaged back, told him to go ahead. Hours passed. I thought maybe he'd chickened out. Maybe it was some scammer fishing for drama. Then around midnight, he replied. He said he had slept with my girlfriend. I just stared at that screen. You'd think after all these years the world couldn't surprise you anymore, but it can. He went on, said he wasn't trying to boast or humiliate me, just that he figured I deserved to know. Said he'd been cheated on once and wished somebody had told him back then. I didn't want to believe it. God, I didn't want to. I told myself he's mistaken, this is some mix-up. But when I asked for proof, he gave me a date, a club name. And then came the picture. It was from one of those club photographers, the kind that wanders around taking candid shots of people smiling with their drinks. And there she was, Anna, with this guy's arms slung around her shoulders, holding a bottle like they owned the night together. I must have stared at that picture for 10 minutes. It didn't show them kissing. Didn't show anything outright. But the look on her face, carefree, glowing, happy, was a look I hadn't seen in a long time. I scrolled back through our messages from that night. She'd stopped replying to me around 10 p.m., said the next morning she'd just been tired and gone to bed early, and there she was out in a club smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where reality rearranges itself right in front of you. Feels like the floor drops out. The woman I'd built my future around suddenly became a stranger. Still, I needed to hear it from the man himself. We agreed to meet the next day at a quiet cafe. It was awkward at first, 2 men sitting across from each other, one with his heart in his throat. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just laid it out. He told me he was a club promoter there most nights and that Anna hadn't seemed like someone who was taken. Said they'd left together around 3 in the morning, went back to his place, drank champagne, and, well, you can fill in the blanks. It didn't happen just once. It happened 3 times before sunrise. He looked uncomfortable telling me that, and I sat there nodding like my body had gone on autopilot. I needed to know every detail because some foolish part of me thought maybe that would help me let go. When I left that cafe, the world felt quieter, colder, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing had happened. You know, people always say trust is the foundation of a relationship, but what they don't tell you is how fragile that foundation is. One night, one secret can knock it all down like a house of cards. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying 5 years of moments in my head, trips we'd taken, birthdays we'd celebrated, plans we'd made. I wondered which smiles had been real and which had been just good acting. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to see Anna. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or make a scene. I just wanted to look her in the eye and hear what she had to say. But deep down, I think I already knew. I didn't sleep much the night before. When you've been with someone for 5 years, your mind doesn't just flip a switch. It drifts, it wanders, it pulls you through every memory, the first time you met them, the first time you held hands, the quiet mornings where you thought this must be what forever feels like. But forever feels awfully short when you find out it's been shared with somebody else. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, turning that photo over in my head 100 times. Part of me wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that there was some explanation that would make all of this vanish. But the other part, the part that had sat across from Devon and heard every last detail, knew better. By mid-morning, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my keys, took a deep breath, and drove to Anna's apartment. She opened the door like any other day, smiling, her hair a little messy like she'd just gotten out of bed wearing one of those oversized t-shirts she loved. For one moment, I felt my chest tighten. This was the woman I had almost bought a ring for. "Hey, babe," she said, stepping back to let me in. "What's going on?" "You look serious." I sat on the couch. My hands felt too big for my lap, like they didn't know where to rest. She sat across from me, folding her legs under herself, waiting. "When's the last time you went to the club?" I asked. Her smile faltered. She didn't answer right away. That hesitation told me almost as much as anything she would eventually say. A few weeks ago, maybe," she said finally. "That's right," I said softly, looking at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" She frowned like she thought this was a trick question. "I knew you didn't like it," she said. "Nothing happened. I just didn't want to deal with a fight over something that wasn't a big deal." I nodded, slow and heavy. "How many times have you gone without telling me?" She froze. I could hear the air conditioner click on in the silence. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. I don't know," she whispered. "You don't know or you don't want to say?" She swallowed hard. "I can't count. A lot, I guess." I closed my eyes and let that sink in. Trust doesn't break in one clean crack. It splinters. And that answer splintered what was left of mine. I tried one last time. "Is there anything else I need to know? Anything happen on one of those nights?" She shook her head, quick and certain. "Absolutely nothing," she said. That's when I pulled out my phone. The photo glowed on the screen, Anna smiling, leaning into Devon's arm, a bottle of champagne raised like a trophy. "What about this?" I asked, holding it out. She barely blinked before saying, "That's not me." I laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd I almost couldn't process it. "You're really going with that?" I asked. "It just looks like me," she said, softer now, like she was trying to soothe me. "But it's not." "Anna," I said, my voice low, "you own that top. I have a picture of you wearing it. This is you." She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting everywhere but my face. Then mid-sentence, she changed her story. "Okay, maybe it looks like me," she said quickly, "but people can fake photos now. There's AI stuff. Maybe someone doesn't like me. Maybe they edited this to make it look bad." I just stared at her. I'd spent the entire night preparing for anger, for tears, for some kind of breakdown. What I hadn't prepared for was this, the lie so bold it almost felt insulting. "You're telling me this is AI?" I asked. Maybe she said with a little shrug. "I don't know, but it's not me, I swear." And right there, something inside me settled. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt calm, the kind of calm you only get when the decision's already been made for you. I talked to him, I said quietly. Her head snapped up. Who? Devin, I said. The guy you left the club with. He told me everything, what you drank, where you went, how many times it happened. Everything. Her mouth opened like she was going to deny it again, but nothing came out. Her face went pale and she sank back against the couch. Do you know what it feels like to hear that? I asked, my voice shaking now. To sit across from another man while he tells you what happened between him and the woman you thought you were going to marry. She didn't answer. I can't do this anymore, I said. I can't be with someone who lies this easily, who looks me in the eye and tells me a story about AI while I'm holding proof in my hand. I stood up. She followed me as I went through her apartment, gathering the few things I'd left there, a toothbrush, a hoodie, a stack of books by her nightstand. Wait, she said, tears starting now. Please, can we talk about this? We can fix this. No, I said, my voice breaking. We can't fix this. You didn't just make a mistake, Anna. You lied. Over and over again. You hid things, and you let me plan a future with someone who wasn't really there. By the time I reached the door, she was crying hard, the sound tearing through the quiet apartment. And here's the thing that hurt. It hurt worse than I thought it would. Because even after everything, some part of me still loved her. But love isn't enough when trust is gone. I walked out without looking back. The drive home felt endless. My hands gripped the wheel so tight they ached. Every song on the radio felt like it was mocking me. When I finally got home, the silence hit me like a wave. I boxed up the rest of her things, taped it shut, wrote her name on the top. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. You know, people like to say forgiveness sets you free. Maybe that's true. But sometimes walking away is the only freedom you get. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, listening to the ceiling fan spin. The life I thought I had was gone. The woman I thought I knew was gone. And for the first time in 5 years, I realized I had no idea what tomorrow would look like. But one thing was certain, tomorrow wasn't going to have Anna in it. The first few days after the breakup were the hardest. I'd wake up and forget just for a second that anything had happened. Then it would hit me all over again, the picture, the lies, her face when she realized I knew. It's funny how heartbreak sneaks up on you. I wasn't the kind of man who cried easily. But that first night alone, I sat at my kitchen table and just let go. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears for a life that had ended without a funeral. And then came the anger. Anger's different. It doesn't hit you all at once. It simmers. It waits until you're brushing your teeth or sitting in traffic or trying to sleep, and then it bubbles up and says, "You can't just let her walk away from this." I tried to ignore it at first. Told myself the breakup was enough, that I was taking the high road by just moving on. But every time I thought about her looking me in the eye and saying, "That's not me, it's AI," the anger flared again. That was when I realized I wasn't done. Not yet. One night, about 3 weeks later, I poured myself a drink, whiskey, no ice, and sat staring at that picture on my phone. I thought about all the times Anna had sworn she was tired and going to bed early. All the times I'd believed her. All the times I'd fawned over her like a fool, thinking we were building something real. And I thought, she walked away with nothing but a breakup. No real consequences, no one knows what she did. That was when the idea hit me. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to smash anything or send her late-night texts. I was going to do something quieter, something permanent. I opened my messages and found her mother's number first. I sat there a long time before typing. I don't know if Anna has told you that we broke up, but I thought you should know why. This picture was taken while we were still together. She told me she went to bed early that night. She didn't. I attached the photo and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I sent it to her dad, then her sister, then her brother. One by one, I sent the picture and the story, not with rage, not with insults, just with cold, simple facts. When I was done with her family, I sent it to a few mutual friends. Then on a whim, I posted it to my Instagram story with a caption that read, "AI has gotten so advanced these days. Almost looks like my ex was out with another guy while we were together. Crazy, right?" I tagged her handle. And then I posted the same thing to X. The reaction came fast. My phone buzzed for hours, messages, comments, shares. I didn't reply to a single one. I just let it sit there, let the internet do what it does best. By evening, there was a knock at my door. A hard one. I opened it, and there she was, Anna, eyes blazing, her hair, wild face flushed with anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted the moment I opened the door. Before I could answer, she was in my face screaming about how I had humiliated her, how everyone she knew had seen the post, how I'd ruined her life. She poked me in the chest, shoved me once. "You think you're a man because you post pictures online? You could have just cheated on me back to get even. But no, you had to be petty. You had to act like a child." I just stood there listening until she ran out of words. Then I said quietly, "I didn't cheat on you because I'm not like you. I did this because you lied, Anna. You lied to my face, even when I gave you a chance to tell me the truth. And now everyone gets to know who you really are." Her mouth opened like she might say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I grabbed the collar of her jacket and marched her back toward the door. "If you ever show up at my house again," I said, my voice low, "I'll get a restraining order. We're done. There's nothing left here for you." Then I shut the door. I stood there for a long time after she left, leaning against the wall, breathing hard. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear, it was relief. The next morning I woke up lighter than I had in weeks. Don't get me wrong, it still hurt. It still does sometimes. 5 years doesn't disappear overnight. But there was a peace that hadn't been there before. I'd said my piece. I'd taken back my power. I don't know if revenge really fixes anything, but it gave me something I needed: closure. And maybe that's the thing about getting older. You stop waiting for someone else to make things right. You learn you have to do it yourself, even if it's messy. Anna hasn't tried to contact me again. Her family hasn't either. Sometimes late at night, I still look at that photo. Not because I'm angry anymore, but because it reminds me what I survived. It reminds me that I can trust my gut, that I can stand up for myself when I need to. I might even post it again one day if I feel like it. Not out of spite, just as a little reminder that lies have a way of coming to light. For now, though, I'm just letting myself heal. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I do know this tomorrow belongs to me. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.